The hum of private jet engines roared in the distance, but all James Knight could hear was the quiet collapse of everything he had built. He stood still on the tarmac, blazer flapping against the late afternoon wind, as his wife and supposed business partner, Maya Knight, descended the steps of the jet just long enough to deliver the words that would burn themselves into his memory forever. "You're not on the list, James. This is family and board only." She didn't say it with anger. She didn't even raise her voice. The dismissal was cold, surgical, as if she were cutting a loose thread. James blinked. For a second, he thought she was joking. They had built Flow Matrix together from the ground up, nights fueled by takeout and code, days fighting for investor meetings, pushing the limits of AI and traffic and logistics systems. And now, here he was, reduced to a nobody, standing outside the very thing he helped create. He let out a soft, almost disbelieving laugh. "Is this supposed to be funny?" Maya didn't blink. She adjusted her sunglasses and waved over security. The guards moved silently toward him, not with aggression, but with certainty. That's what cut deepest. They weren't confused. They knew this had been planned. This wasn't a mistake. It was an execution. Behind the jet's tinted windows, James spotted executives, people he had mentored, engineers he had recruited personally, sipping champagne. One or two looked away, unwilling to meet his gaze. Others smirked, already rewriting history in their minds. Maya had been slowly shifting credit for years. Press interviews where she was the visionary and he the technical advisor. Investors started forgetting his name. Publicly, Flow Matrix had become her empire. And now it was clear he wasn't just being left behind. He was being erased. James took a step back. His chest tightened, not in panic, but in clarity. He said, voice low but unwavering. He would not scream, he would not beg. Let them fly away thinking they had won. Let Maya believe she had successfully deleted him. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the foundation of Flow Matrix, the living, breathing AI core that powered it all, was still his. Every heartbeat of that system, every thread of logic and code, it pulsed with his DNA. And hidden deep within it was something he had buried long ago. A back door, a silent failsafe, a final whisper of ownership. As the jet lifted off into the golden sky, James didn't look up. He looked forward. If they thought they had shut him out, they were about to learn a painful truth. You don't discard the architect and expect the building to stand. As James drove away from the airstrip, the sun setting behind him, he didn't head home. He didn't want to see the penthouse they once shared, a place that now felt more like a showroom for Maya's ego than a home. Instead, he drove to the one place that still belonged to him in spirit, his original one-bedroom apartment, the same cramped space where Flow Matrix had been born. The building hadn't changed, still dim, still reeking faintly of fried noodles and printer ink. He unlocked the rusted door and stepped into a room that had once cradled his obsession. A second-hand desk, now covered in dust, still stood in the corner. And there, beneath a pile of old notebooks and charging cables, sat his original laptop. He opened it. It booted slowly, groaning with age, but eventually revealed the project that had changed everything: Aetherflow, his prototype AI model capable of real-time adaptive analysis of traffic data. James had built it line by line, feeding it with terabytes of transit patterns, surveillance data, and predictive logic. Back then, no one cared, no one listened, until Maya walked into the demo hall at that industry conference. She wasn't wearing Prada then, no team of handlers,
just a woman with a sharp tongue, sharper eyes, and a desperate pitch. Her startup was hemorrhaging. He still remembered her words that night. "You've got the brain, I've got the mouth. Let's make something big." And they did. He coded through sunrises. She scheduled investor dinners. They operated like two halves of a single organism, her charisma opening doors, his code dazzling whoever stepped through. It wasn't just business. It was a partnership, a romance, a vision they shared, fueled by ramen noodles and midnight whiteboards. She called him her secret weapon. He called her his compass. But something shifted after their first round of major funding. It started small, Maya taking more interviews solo. She said it was for efficiency. "They want the face," she told him. "You don't like cameras anyway." Then, the press releases only mentioned her. The company website began evolving. His bio was pushed down, then deleted. When he protested, she reassured him with a kiss and a glass of wine. "You know it doesn't matter who gets the credit, James. We're winning." But it did matter, because by the time Flowmetrics landed a $200 million contract with the Department of Transportation, James was no longer in the boardroom. He wasn't even invited to pitch meetings. Instead, he was shuffled to a side office, reduced to lead developer, while Maya took full credit for the entire platform, his platform. Worse still, she told their engineers that James had stepped back voluntarily. Investors started addressing him with half-hearted nods, as if he were some early intern who got lucky. At the company gala, his name wasn't even on the program. He stood at the back, while Maya delivered a glowing keynote about her vision for Flowmetrics. James never wanted fame, but he had wanted respect, recognition, and Maya had stolen even that. He slammed the laptop shut. The rage bubbled up now, not hot and chaotic, but cold, clean, focused. She thought she could erase him. But she had made a critical mistake. Maya had always believed she could talk her way to the top, but she had never understood how the system truly worked. Flowmetrics's core AI wasn't just his idea, it was his architecture. Every line of its foundational code, every adaptive routine, every security handshake, it had been born in this very apartment. And just like any good engineer, James had built a hidden layer, a failsafe, something small, encrypted, embedded deep in the base kernel, something no board member, no CTO, no investor even knew existed. A back door, not a malicious one, not designed for sabotage, just insurance, just in case the world ever forgot who he was. He pulled up a terminal and began typing. Slowly, deliberately, the old system stirred awake. It was outdated by now, sure, but it was still connected, like a vein running through the spine of a digital beast. And now, that beast belonged to him again. The rage wasn't just about being discarded, it was about betrayal. It was about watching the person he trusted most take everything they had built together and rewrite the story as if he had never existed. But the beauty of code, unlike memory, was that it could be traced, restored, controlled. Maya had taken his name off the glass tower, but James still held the blueprint for the whole foundation. He stared at the blinking cursor, heart calm for the first time in weeks. It was time to write a new script, one Maya wouldn't see coming.
The room was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the server drive and the rhythmic clicking of James's fingers against the keyboard. On the screen, lines of code scrolled rapidly, each keystroke reclaiming a sliver of what had been stolen from him. James wasn't rushing. No, this wasn't an impulsive act of revenge. It was a methodical, strategic reclaiming of control. The digital backdoor he had coded years ago, buried deep within Flow Matrix's neural architecture, was activating flawlessly. It wasn't just a backdoor, it was an override mechanism, a silent governor that granted him root access to every core system. Admin logs, machine learning weights, API endpoints, user permissions. Maya may have owned the building, the headlines, and the spotlight, but he still held the heart of the empire. First move, access logs. James watched as pages of activity unfolded before him. Board-level accounts were pinging the central server, as usual, unaware that their permissions had already been downgraded. Even Maya's own profile, Executive Admin 001, was now shadow-blocked. To her, everything would still appear normal, for now. Next step, reset the access keys. He quietly revoked every executive-level credential, rendering Maya, the board, and even the CTO powerless. Then, he generated a new tier of encrypted access, assigning it solely to a new identity, A_founder_0. Invisible, undetectable, entirely him. By dawn, he had seized control of every critical system in Flow Matrix's infrastructure, from the back-end analytics engine to the client-side dashboards that powered contracts across transportation departments nationwide. The irony wasn't lost on him. She had locked him out of a jet, but now he had locked her out of the system that gave her wings. Still, he didn't want chaos. Not yet. He wanted to bleed her credibility slowly. The next day, subtle anomalies began to surface at Flow Matrix headquarters. First, reports came in from the Department of Transit, latency spikes, delayed updates. Some cities were seeing outdated routing data pushed through live systems. Nothing dangerous, but enough to cause internal concern. Engineers scrambled to find the problem. Logs showed everything was fine. The issue was systemic, but invisible. Then came the permissions glitch. Maya arrived to the office at 7:42 a.m., as always, her assistant in tow. She logged into her dashboard, only to find a simple message blinking back. Access denied. Please contact system administrator. Confused, she called the CTO, who had the same issue. By 8 a.m., all executive logins had been deactivated. Panic began to ripple through the leadership floor. Analysts couldn't access performance dashboards. PR couldn't release new updates. Client management was locked out of status reports. And yet, the system was running. All live services were functioning without failure. Traffic forecasts continued. The data pipelines were intact. James had intentionally left the system's operations untouched. He wanted no civilian harm, no lawsuits, just pressure. Just Maya, squirming under the weight of uncertainty while the company slipped out of her grasp one silent bite at a time. At 9 a.m., the board held an emergency call. James watched from his personal server, sipping coffee in his dimly lit apartment as their video feed flickered to life, unaware he had patched in as a silent observer through an old conference ID. He listened as Maya attempted to calm the room, assuring them it was a temporary glitch, but her voice trembled. "We have top engineers on it," she said. "It's just a minor credential sync issue. Legacy code, probably." That made him smirk. Legacy code. The very thing she erased him for was now the ghost in her machine. At 10:15 a.m., the first investor email leaked, a panicked inquiry asking why Flow Matrix had locked itself out. Stocks dipped 3%. By noon, journalists had caught on. A Forbes tech reporter tweeted, "Unconfirmed reports of executive lockout at Flow Matrix.
Could this be the beginning of a leadership fracture? It was working. But James wasn't done. At 2 p.m., he pushed the second phase live. He uploaded an anonymous data leak, an unprotected private archive of original engineering schematics for Flowmatrix's core product. Dated, time-stamped, each slide bore his initials. Each page detailed the true development roadmap, the one he had drafted years ago, before Maya ever touched the code. The leak spread fast. Reddit threads ignited. TechHanner exploded with comparisons. Tech blogs that had once worshipped Maya began writing cautiously neutral headlines. By 4 p.m., "Who Really Built Flowmatrix" was trending on LinkedIn. James didn't gloat. He didn't post. He didn't speak. He simply waited. At 6:37 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know it's you. Please, let's talk. M." He ignored it. She had spoken those exact words to him years ago at a tech conference when they first met. "I think we should talk." Back then, it was the beginning of a partnership. Now, it was the unraveling of a queen who had built her throne on someone else's code. He stood from the desk, stretching, cracking his knuckles. Tonight, she would learn what it felt like to be silenced, to be invisible, to be erased. Except, unlike what she did to him, he would make sure the world saw every step of her descent.
The next morning began with chaos. James was already awake before sunrise, seated in front of his laptop with a mug of black coffee in hand, eyes flickering across live feeds, Slack logs, and server diagnostics. He didn't need the news alerts to know the system had fully locked. He'd flipped the final switch at 3:06 a.m. By 7 a.m., Flowmatrix was paralyzed. Customer support systems were offline. The predictive routing engine had frozen, leaving thousands of contracts with city departments unable to process logistics data. Internally, executives couldn't log in. External clients couldn't reach their dashboards. Maya's silence overnight had been telling, her refusal to acknowledge what she feared most. But now, the company she claimed to build was slipping through her fingers in front of the entire world. James had timed it perfectly. At 7:48 a.m., his phone buzzed again. Not Maya this time. It was Devin Hart, Flowmatrix's senior board member and lead investor. The man who once shook his hand and called him the quiet genius, only to later allow Maya to bury his name behind corporate smoke and mirrors. James let the call go to voicemail. Then came another, from Colleen Reyes, the company's original legal counsel. Then 3 in a row from unknown numbers. Emails poured in. Subject lines like, "Urgent, Flowmatrix access lockdown. Need your help, please respond. Let's fix this. Your terms." At 9:14 a.m., the stock ticker told the real story. Flowmatrix had dropped 12% in under 2 hours. Tech outlets ran headlines like wildfire. Rumors of executive ouster as Flowmatrix faces total lockdown. Was the company's co-founder silenced? Sources say yes. Maya had always been careful with her narrative. Slick press, tight control over messaging, but she never planned for this. Not for the truth to leak from within. At 10:02 a.m., James received an encrypted Zoom link from the board. He debated, then clicked join. A wall of familiar faces appeared. 12 executives, once allies, now cornered animals. Some offered forced smiles. Others looked exhausted, scared. In the center was Maya, her jaw tight, expression unreadable. Devin leaned forward. "James,
thank you for joining. As you can imagine, we're facing a significant disruption." James didn't smile. He didn't speak. "Let me be clear," Devin continued, his voice controlled. "We know you're the only person who can restore Flow Matrix, and we're prepared to recognize your original contributions formally." James arched an eyebrow. "Recognize?" "Yes," another board member chimed in. "We've reviewed internal documents, the ones Maya withheld. It's clear that the foundational system was designed entirely by you. The board was unaware. Unaware, or willfully blind." A tense pause. Finally, Devin said what James had been waiting to hear for years. "We owe you a public apology, James. And more than that, we'd like to reinstate you, as co-founder, with full voting power." James leaned back. "Maya?" he asked calmly. She shifted in her seat, lips pressed thin. I made mistakes, but we can't move forward without you." "No." James said firmly, "You can't move backward without me. There's a difference." And with that, he dropped the final condition. "I'll restore the system, but only after a public statement from the board acknowledging me as the original architect and technical founder. I want my name on every patent, every page, every legacy system where it belongs. Full creative rights to the AI. And Maya?" She met his gaze. Steps down. Gasps. A few murmured protests, but no outright rejection. Maya didn't argue. She nodded once, silent, humiliated. James ended the call without a thank you. 2 hours later, Flow Matrix issued a press release. In a historic correction, Flow Matrix acknowledges James Alcott as the original technical founder and sole creator of the Flow Core AI infrastructure. Effective immediately, Mr. Alcott will retain full rights to his codebase and all associated IP. Former CEO Maya Sterling will transition out of her role following internal review. TechCrunch, Forbes, even the Wall Street Journal ran with it. But James wasn't looking back. That same evening, he launched his next chapter, Flow Forge. A new AI platform, faster, smarter, unshackled by corporate bloat. Built for engineers, backed by truth. Within 24 hours of the announcement, his inbox overflowed. Former Flow Matrix engineers reached out, offering to join. Venture firms who once turned their backs sent investment terms. Clients who had abandoned Flow Matrix sent messages like, "We'd rather work with the real founder." Even Devin emailed again. "If you ever consider a buyout, we'd love to talk." But James didn't respond. He'd built Flow Matrix in silence. He built Flow Forge in clarity. And this time, no one would rewrite his name out of history.
It had been 3 weeks since James Alcott reclaimed his name. Flow Matrix was now just a shell, an empty, stumbling corporation desperately trying to salvage its reputation under interim leadership. The public had moved on, the investors had fled, and FlowForge, James's new platform, was already generating buzz as the future of AI automation. Still, there was one final page to turn. James was scheduled to speak at the Global AI Futures Summit in Boston. It wasn't a press tour or a product launch, it was a panel on ethical software development. Ironically, a topic Maya had once claimed expertise in. He arrived quietly, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, ID badge clipped to his chest, laptop slung over his shoulder.
The name on his pass read, James Alcott, founder, Flowforge. He stepped into the atrium of the convention center just as the evening panel ended. Bright lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. Attendees sipped wine and networked in hushed tones beneath banners bearing the names of sponsors. Flowforge, now among them. Then he saw her, Maya Sterling. She stood near the bar, in a navy blue blazer, hair pinned back, looking smaller than he remembered. There was no entourage, no assistants, no cameras orbiting her like they once did. She was just there, alone. Their eyes met. For a second, she didn't move. Then slowly, almost hesitantly, she walked toward him. "James," she said softly. I didn't speak, just waited. Her eyes glistened under the chandelier light. "I wasn't sure you'd come to this." "I'm on the panel," he replied evenly. She nodded, swallowing hard. "I saw the release. Flowforge is brilliant. You always were the real architect." He gave no reaction. "I didn't come to fight," she added quickly. "I came to say I didn't understand what I was doing until it was too late." James looked at her, really looked, and for the first time didn't feel anger or bitterness, just clarity, the kind that comes only after a storm has passed. "I'm not here for apologies, Maya," he said calmly. She exhaled shakily. "Then what are you here for?" He leaned in slightly, voice low but firm. "I'm here to show the world that only true architects rebuild. My name was always on the blueprint. You just painted over it." Her face fell. He turned to walk away, but paused. "You know," he added, glancing back, "you once told me we were unstoppable together. But I was never trying to stop the world, Maya. I was trying to build something better." She said nothing. Her lips trembled. Then he walked away, back into the crowd, past old colleagues, young engineers, new believers, back to the future he'd ridden himself into. He didn't look back. Behind him, Maya remained frozen, tears pooling in her eyes, mascara threatening to run. Someone snapped a photo, not realizing who she was anymore. And in that moment, James felt something powerful. Not revenge, not triumph, but peace. Flowforge launched its open beta 2 days later. Within a week, it had over 200,000 signups. Former clients of Flowmatrix transitioned smoothly, citing better transparency, cleaner structure, and, most importantly, leadership with integrity. Tech magazines called James the ghost genius who rewrote his fate. University panels invited him to speak. Forbes named him Innovator of the Year. But James didn't chase headlines. He returned home to Vermont, planted a new tree outside his window, built a simple studio behind his home where he could code in silence. No boardroom battles, no betrayal, just creation. Because that's who he was, a builder. And this time, no one could take that from him.
In the weeks that followed the collapse of Flowmatrix and the quiet rise of Flowforge, James Alcott finally found the silence he once feared and learned to embrace it. He no longer needed applause, press interviews, or a seat at someone else's boardroom table. Every morning, he brewed his coffee in the same old French press, walked past the maple trees in his backyard, and sat down at his modest workbench where the light came in just right. There, in that small converted barn behind his Vermont home, he returned to what he loved most, building for the sake of building. The journey from betrayal to peace hadn't been about crushing Maya or proving himself to the world. It had been about reclaiming what had always been his. Not just intellectual property or market credibility, but his voice, his purpose, his name. And for the first time in years, he felt whole. Maya had tried to define his legacy through erasure, but James had done something more powerful. He'd redefined himself through creation. Where she had weaponized ambition, he had chosen integrity. And while her world burned in silence, his grew in quiet strength. Life lesson. Don't let betrayal convince you that your worth depends on someone else's recognition. True empowerment doesn't come from retaliation, it comes from restoration. You don't need to destroy someone to win. Sometimes rising higher than they imagined you could is the loudest justice of all. James's story isn't just about tech empires or intellectual theft. It's about what we choose to build after everything we've built is taken from us. It's about understanding that being erased doesn't mean you're gone. It means you're about to begin again, smarter, quieter, stronger. If this story struck a chord with you, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or erased? Share your story in the comments. Let's grow stronger together. And if you believe in stories of justice, resilience, and rising from the ashes, subscribe to the channel. Your voice, like James's, deserves to be heard.